Hey class, Mr. M here with a video to introduce to you our unit on circles. Circles are the most fundamental in some senses of all of our shapes, the most central, the simplest. And before we start, what I want you to do is really think about what does it mean to be a circle? What is the definition of a circle? You can't really just say it's a round thing. For example, this looks circular, but it's not really a circle. This is not a circle. This is not a circle, right? So what makes a circle a circle? So I encourage you to pause the video, have a think on that, and then we'll look at the dictionary definition, because in this case the dictionary definition is a good and an important one. Alright, so I hope you've thought about that. Let's take a look at what a circle really is. A circle is the set of all points in the plane. That's an important part to understand there. It's on a flat surface. The set of all points in space that are the same distance is called a sphere, right? A ball. But this is a set of points on a flat plane that are the same distance from a center point. If any of the points on the outside edge are further away or closer to the center than any other, then it's not a circle. What makes it a circle? It's that same fixed distance. And that distance, of course, we all know is called the radius. So you have a center, you have a radius, and bingo, you have a circle. That's what a compass is, right? Fixed center, open up to make the radius, and there you have it. There's a couple other fundamental points, aspects of the circle that we probably already know, but it's good to review. This line that I'm drawing here is the longest segment that lies entirely from one point on the circle to another, and that's of course called the diameter. And this outside ring, right, the actual set of points that make a circle, that is called the circumference. Circumference. Now, pi is a number that people often associate with circles for good reason, frankly. What is pi, besides a delicious after-dinner treat? Pi is, by definition, so pi is defined to be this right here. The circumference divided by the diameter. For any circle, pi is this right here. 3.14 will always equal how long it is on the outside of the circle, right? How far it is all the way around. How long is that compared to, so right, in ratio to how wide it is all the way across the circle. That's what pi is by definition, the ratio of circumference to diameter. And for any circle in the entire universe, it will always be 3.1415 onwards into infinity. So there's just some basic fundamentals about circles. So there are a few terms about circles that you may not be as familiar with, which I wanted to introduce to you in this video. So I'm going to show you a couple of those. Here you have a variety of lines that intersect or sit on the circle in one way or another. This line right here you probably may remember, hopefully may remember from the beginning of the year, and that is called a chord. A chord is a line segment whose endpoints are on the circle. So that's a chord. We actually already saw a chord a little while ago. This line right here, whoops, I meant to use the ruler for that. This line right here, also called the diameter, right, is a fancy kind of chord because it happens to go through the middle. But any chord simply has its endpoints spanning the circle. You could think of this as like a string, right? You're sort of stringing the edge of the circle the way you might with a tennis racket, or maybe stretching something across a drum face, right? That's a chord. This line right here is in red is very closely related to the idea of a chord in that part of it is a chord, right? This section right here is the chord part. But notice that as opposed to a segment, this thing has arrows, which indicates it goes on forever. And that means it has a special name, and that is called a secant. A secant is a line that intersects the circle twice. So, line that crosses twice, to kind of abbreviate here, because I'm short on room. A line that crosses the circle twice. Contrast that with this green line here. That is called it's supposed to have arrowheads, sorry. That is called a tangent. And this part often gets people confused because, well, Mr. M, we've talked about tangent for weeks now with trigonometry. Those two concepts are related. How they're related we'll see a little bit later on in our unit, but for now it's important to realize that tangent in this case is essentially coming from the same Latin root as to touch. So that says to touch. And notice, in contrast to the secant line, the tangent line only touches the circle once. You see how the secant line crosses the circle twice? The tangent line crosses the circle only once. It doesn't even really cross it, it just sort of grazes it and then never meets it again. So let me try to write that here. Crosses circle at only one point. So this point right here is actually a very important one in a variety of aspects of mathematics. That point where the tangent line grazes the circle, right? It sort of comes into it and then crosses and then keeps going straight but never into the circle. The circle sort of bends away from it in both directions, right? That point is called the point of tangency. That is where the touching occurs, which sounds kind of weird, but anyway, that's the point of tangency. So there are a couple of important aspects to circles which you may not be familiar with. The chord, the secant, and the tangent line, including the point of tangency. We have a couple of others, and here's a picture showing some of those other terms. So one idea I want you to keep in mind here, just so you have sort of a tangible feel for what this represents. You can kind of think of this in analogy terms, sort of as a pizza, just because everyone loves pizza, right? In a sense, this purple area here, I don't know why it's purple, onions I guess, this pizza here, this purple part of the pizza, or the circle to be more precise, is what is known as not a slice, but rather a sector. So a sector is essentially a slice of a circle. A sector is kind of like a slice. And it's important to realize that the slice has its two boundary points, these that I'm outlining here in purple, right? These points here, or lines here rather, segments here, have to intersect in the middle, right? You don't get a weird slice by just cutting it randomly, right? You cut the slice in the middle. So a sector is essentially analogous or akin to or alike to the idea of a slice. Now it's important to realize that these two purple lines are indeed radiuses, or radii to be more precise. This purple line is a radius, and so is this one. So you could think of it as, what is a sector? It is the slice of the circle, or the area section here of the circle, that is bound by the two radii. There's also a third boundary that we'll get to in just a minute, but for now, sector, that's the slice. Well, the size of a sector is dependent upon the angle that creates it, right? If you create a big, wide, huge slice, right, that takes away a lot of the pizza, that is a bigger angle and therefore a bigger sector than a narrower, smaller slice or sector. So that angle there, that's radiating literally out of the middle of the circle, out of the center of the circle, is therefore called a central angle. And that should make sense to you, I hope. What is a central angle? An angle in the middle? Yeah, basically. That's basically what it is. It's an angle in the center. This green line here, you already know what it's called. I hope. We just talked about it. It's called a chord, right? So that's called a chord. But let's say you are kind of a weirdo, and you decide to have your pizza slice and ruin it for everybody and kind of get this weird thing right here, right? Why? I don't know. You want to get that checked out. But anyway, that green place is not a sector, right? You're not slicing it the way 9 out of 10 human beings do. You sort of have this weird crust-heavy part, and that thing is called a segment. And that often confuses people because, Mr. M, I thought a segment is part of a line. Yeah, it is, usually. Unfortunately, this is one area of mathematics where you have a variety of terms for the same thing, and that part there is called a segment. So it's sort of a part that is bound by a chord as opposed to bound by two radii. So the segment of a circle is this green section here. Now let's talk about my favorite part of the pizza. Well, not favorite, but I do like this part of the pizza, and that's the crust. So the crust, the outer ring of the circle, the actual part that defines the circle, we've kind of ignored until now. So this orange part here, I am outlining, that is called an arc. Why? Because it's curved. Duh. I mean, kind of. In this case, some of the words are named in natural ways. It's curved, therefore it's an arc, right? It's sort of an arch in the the Roman sense, I guess. So it's an arc. Now you got to be careful here. Between 2 points, Z and A, right? You have sort of this orange arc, but between Z and A, the long way, which I'm going to outline here in blue, this is also an arc that connects Z and A, right? It goes along the edge of the circle and it connects Z and A. So it's important to realize that those are both arcs, but this smaller one is called a minor arc, and this larger one is called a major arc. Between 2 points on the circle, as long as those points are not directly across from each other, but along 2 points on the circle, there is a short way to go, the minor arc, and a long way to go, again, along the edge of the circle, that's called the major arc. All right, so a couple of important terminology items there. All right, so in this video we've talked about a wide variety of things, all the way back from the very basics of what a circle is, to some of the basic definitions you already know, right? Diameter, radius, circumference, right? To some things that you may not be as familiar with. Chord, tangent, secant. Make sure you understand the similarities and differences among these, and we will of course do a lot of practice, but this is sort of your introduction to it. And then some other terminology, including sectors, central angle, minor and major arcs, and segments. All right, we're going to investigate these some more in class, but I hope this helped set the stage for our circles unit.